Hi guys, how's it going? And welcome back to another video on Amazon's New World. So we've just had a huge ton of information dropped in the January patch notes, and with some pretty significant changes kind of hitting the shores of Eternum in this January update. And I kind of wanted to break this down, see the key changes, and see, well, is the game actually continuing to move in the right direction? Or at least what I perceive to be the right direction. I think it's been kind of going a little bit more in the direction that a lot of people want over the past couple of months since the preview event. So the update primarily seems to be focused around the crafting system, kind of reworking that, trying to make it much more usable, particularly in the end game. But before we dive into all that, I think it is worth talking about the new weapon that's being released into the game, the Rapier. Scaling off your character's dexterity skill, the Rapier is going to be all about that sort of speed and piercing damage. I mean, interestingly, given that it's scaling off dexterity, I think this could well be a weapon that is going to be the choice for most ranged players out there. The weapon will, like all the others, have two different weapon mastery trees to choose from, either Blood or Grace. The first is going to be focused on applying stacks of bleed damage to the enemy, before seemingly sort of combining and activating all these at once to sort of one really hard-hitting finishing ability. So it's almost going to be like a building up ability. You're going to be doing low damage for a while, getting these bleed stacks in, and then when you activate them all together, that's when you're going to be getting that big hit and hopefully sort of one-shotting things. And then you're going to have the Grace line. This is much more focused on posture, evasions, counter-attacking. It's going to feel much more, probably like a rapier should be used like, a bit more like fencing. Could actually be really interesting as well, trying to counter some of those bigger axes, with your tiny little rapier. Could make for some quite comical gameplay, but could also be quite an effective class. There is obviously also going to be a legendary rapier quest. Once you're level 60, you're going to be able to collect all the relevant parts to complete the quest and get the Rapier Frozen Lament. But it is not only the new Rapier that is being added, we're also getting a big range of combat improvements in this update. Firstly, you're actually now only going to be having 2 weapon slots in which you can use. This is probably actually going to be quite a radical change and really going to mix up loadouts quite a lot, I think. Particularly if you plan to use something like a life staff, or if you plan to be a dual ranged weapon class, and this is really going to limit your options a lot more. I guess this kind of was a decision to try and force players to make more meaningful decisions about the weapons that they want to level up and use. Although I can't help but slightly feel maybe slightly removing some of the variety from the game. Although this is probably something I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on. Let me know in the comments below, do you think this is a good or kind of a bad change? The AI is also going to be getting significantly more challenging, with increasing numbers of enemies making use of sort of the dynamic light and heavy attacks. This is building on some of the combat updates we got in the December update, so it's kind of just a follow through, but nice to see that being rolled out to a lot more of the characters. As well as the elite enemy system, meaning that now all named enemies who are over level 15 will have a random 1 to 3 affixes applied to them. So this is going to mean they're going to have different characteristics, attacks and behaviours each time you meet them. So hopefully this is going to make for hopefully going to be a slightly more dynamic combat system while fighting AI in the open world. Amazon have also significantly ramped up the difficulty for fighting enemy monsters that are going to be above your player level. So they're going to be giving them large buffs if they're a higher level than you. For example, say you come across an enemy AI monster that is 3 levels higher. It's going to be getting armor buffs, which is going to make it harder for you to be killed. And it's already 3 levels higher, now it's going to be even more tough. And then at 5 levels higher, they're going to be doing increased damage to the player above what they normally do. At level 6 or 6 levels higher, they're going to outright kill players rather than placing them at death's door. So if you're in a group, it's basically going to make it impossible to bring lower level players with you, because if they get hit, they'll instant die and they're not going to be able to be revived. They're also going to be targeting players from an increased distance. It's going to make it probably harder to be able to run through higher level zones. I kind of get the logic behind these changes. I guess I kind of feel like they are trying to stop you basically doing that running through high level zones or being brought along in high level groups to get you sort of power leveled. But I do kind of feel that they might be a bit of a step in the wrong direction. Firstly, 3 levels difference between you and a monster is really quite small, and it's going to create a situation where, unless you're leveled very closely with your friends, you're going to be very limited in either the places you can go or the people you can group up with. You know, if your friends are 3 or 4 levels higher than you, you can no longer go with them on their group raids if they're going to be going for monsters that are equivalent to their level, and it seems a shame to be able to lose that. Eternum is supposed to be about creating your own world and shaping its future. Giving the enemy huge buffs to stop you from being able to leave your own level zone is not really in that spirit. And I don't think, and let's face it, coming up against the high level AI that's 5 levels higher than you is pretty tough anyway. I don't feel like they need significantly buffs to make that better. So this nicely leads us on to the crafting changes. I think it would probably be not unreasonable to say that whilst many of us enjoyed the crafting system in the preview event back in August, once you got beyond a certain level in terms of character level, it was really much more effective to seek drops from enemy monsters than it was to actually really put in the effort to level up your crafting and make your own gear. In short, the endgame crafting felt a little bit pointless, and that is really what this update intends to address. Firstly, proper endgame crafting with legendary weapon and armor crafting has been introduced into the game. We can see this from the screenshots, a sort of new, I'm going to call tier 5.5 ore in the form of this Asmodium. We've also found a load of new crafting recipes and gear sets that have been introduced into the game, giving the players a lot more choice in what they actually want to craft, and hopefully you're going to be able to craft higher tier gear that is really going to be able to compete with some of those drops that players are going to find in the world. You'll also now be able to make use of different categorical ingredients, particularly in cooking, for example. So previously, say if you wanted to make a rabbit stew, you'd have to go out, find a rabbit, kill a rabbit, skin it, get the meat, and then cook it. Now you're going to be able to basically use any source of meat to, well, obviously not make a rabbit stew, but to make any sort of form of stew. So for example, you could use fish, chicken, pork, beef. So it means whatever you're hunting or whatever you're gathering in the open world is actually going to be useful and usable, and you're not necessarily going to have to hunt for very specific food or crafting items in the open world. We have also lost the ward foods, as apparently they intend to be replaced at a later date by potions. So kind of interesting to see some of the other stuff that we have got on the horizon. Kind of because of that, food is now going to be split into 2 distinct groups: healing food and buffing food. Healing food will continue to provide that initial immediate HP recovery and then a long-term slow regain, which is no longer going to be lost on death, so kind of a nice little change, to be honest. Buffs will obviously provide various attribute buffs as you would expect, but they will also continue to provide that long-term slow HP regain as they obviously did previously. So making use of both types of food is probably going to be important if you want to be getting a good ticking HP heal. The devs have also updated the durability and item repair systems. So when an item loses all of its durability, it no longer breaks and unequips itself, but instead it just gets a significant stat debuff. But it can still be used and it can remain equipped by the player. Furthermore, all trade skills have now been sort of brought into line and capped at level 200. So there's now a much more of an element of consistency across the board with all the trade skills. Finally, a few smaller changes that really seemed quite good is the wholesale visual variety that is being added to the settlements. Hopefully they are no longer all going to be looking the same. It's certainly one of the things that was commented on by quite a few people in the preview, and yeah, it's going to be really nice to get a little bit of visual variety being introduced to all the different places that you can visit in Eternum. We're also going to be getting updates to the group XP system. So long as the group as a whole achieves 15% damage to the creature, then everyone in the group will get a split of that XP, so long as they are both in range and have been active within the last 2 minutes, i.e. healing, blocking, doing damage. Anything like that is going to mean they're going to be viable. But you're no longer going to be getting the full amount of monster XP across the group. Instead it's going to be split between the group, because they're determining that it's easier to kill monsters as a group. So obviously you're going to have to determine if you're going to be better off solo grinding or grinding as a group. So I really feel that's been a pretty good selection of changes. I'm a little unsure, particularly around the buffs to AI creatures around the player level differences, but I kind of see the logic why. I just feel that slightly removes some of the element of player free will from the game, which kind of seems like a shame. But overall, a really good selection of changes. I think it's really good to see the crafting system getting the sort of rework and buff that it needs. And I really feel like it's starting to pull the game together as more and more content feels like it's getting introduced and the game is increasingly being fleshed out. But anyway, that's all I've got time for on this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Do let me know what you think about both the video and the patch changes in the comments down below. And of course, subscribe to the channel for lots more New World content.